What's good? It's Woog. Terence Crawford just signed to fight David AVANESYAN on December 10th in defense of Crawford's WBO welterweight title. This is a little bit maddening, isn't it? On the road to ERROL SPENCE versus Terence Crawford, the fight that we've been wanting in boxing for the past few years, a fight that's largely agreed upon to be the best fight that you can make in boxing pound for pound. We've just been waiting for, through one fight after the next fight, both guys taking on a different opponent. I mean, we who remember, for instance, Floyd Mayweather, Manny Pacquiao, and that, extended years beyond even this threshold. But with Spence Crawford, it felt like the perfect thing had developed where Terence Crawford finally gets off a top rank and hop over to PBC and work within that ecosystem and make a fight versus ERROL Spence Jr. We've seen ERROL Spence Jr., Danny Garcia, and then most recently, Yordenis Ugas. And then with Crawford's performance over Sean Porter being the first to ever stop Sean Porter, it just seemed like, okay, now's the time. Let's finally get it done. And even if it dragged out several months in frustrating negotiations, a ton of back and forth on social media, and very, very subtle back and forth, right? Increasingly accusatory, but in general, it's not like just personal and disrespectful. They sound like they both want the fight to be made. They both kind of suggest that the other, fighter's team doesn't feel the same, or in some cases, the fighter doesn't feel the same. But even through those several months of negotiations, we were still thinking, okay, well, as long as on the other side of this, they come out with the fight. Okay, if it's not going to be November, which was like the date everybody was looking at. And, it's not like the mainstream media wasn't, or at least the mainstream boxing media wasn't announcing that this is reportedly agreed upon, all this different language. And I think it was first Mike Coppinger who had done that initial, this is finally agreed upon, right? I remember the Friday that it dropped. Super exciting, but still with like a little shred of, until I see a flyer in a press conference, right? But this week, we got this other kind of different tone post from ERROL Spence Jr. talking, and I think it came across in two posts, talking about how difficult it is, to make 147, that this isn't fun and this isn't easy, right? And then I think that there was a report, a Boxing Scene report, I believe. I believe it was Boxing Scene, but I apologize if I got that one wrong. But the essence of the report was that the Spence team was growing increasingly worried that Terence Crawford, in fact, doesn't want to make this fight. So we got that ominous text from ERROL Spence Jr. about how difficult this is to remain at 147. And then we get that report. Well, then later on in the same night, Dan Rayfield reports that Spence and Crawford is likely now going to happen and has been agreed upon for February. So everybody's looking at the date like, okay, it's not November, but wait a second. Like, is this finally going to happen? But then you just saw the cynicism and like the response, tweets and posts and so forth. As great as it says, and it's coming from Dan Rayfield, who's about as credited as you get in the boxing game in this, modern era, as is Mike Coppinger, Michael Benson, all the newsbreakers, and, the longer time reporters from, Keith Idec to Lance Pugmire. Dan Rayfield, he's a staple in the game. Chris Maddox, like, it's one thing if like a audacious YouTube channel comes out and says, hey, this is going to happen. But when the journalistic brass comes out and do it, there's a larger layer of credibility there. So Dan Rayfield says that it's happening February 4th, and then later in the same night, Terence Crawford announces that he's fighting David AVANESYAN on December 10th. And the reason is because he, like ERROL Spence, wants to get a fight in for 2022. And he says that, we've been negotiating since June, May, basically since ERROL Spence's, fight with Yordenis Ugas, where he stopped Ugas. I think he looked great. A lot of people think that he looked a shred less than. No, I think he looked very, very, very good, very on top. But since then, basically, Terence Crawford is saying that they had been negotiating and that when he was trying to hash out these details, during the contract negotiations, that ERROL Spence was nowhere to be found. That was Terence Crawford's most recent accusation. And look, I don't want to go too deeply into okay, what are they saying and why? That's the whole thing. I don't know, and we don't know unless you know better than me, but I don't know when somebody is just kind of feeling some type of way on a certain day and picks up the phone and wants to tweet something versus when it's more strategic and when it's advised and like say put this message out because this is the goal that we're trying to get to, or this is the narrative that we're trying to drive. I don't know when a post is influenced by that versus when it's just the person, the fighter personally feeling a type of way and wanting to pick up and send a message out. It's just weird that the Spence post, the report, the Dan Rafael announcement of the fight month between Spence and Crawford, and now this Terence Crawford versus David AVANESYAN announcement. This is pretty bizarre, and it's very frustrating, but it's not altogether surprising. It's just not. It's just unfortunate. I mean, this means that Terence Crawford will be at least 35 years old when he gets in the ring, if he gets in the ring with Errol Spence Jr. And like a year and a half ago, 2 years, I was voicing this specific concern, like, hey, wait a second. And this is after Crawford fought like Mean Machine and was about to fight Kell Brook. It's like, okay, he's 33, 34 now, so if we're going to do it, let's do it, because you don't want a fight of this magnitude and this quality to be tainted with, okay, now this guy hit the mid-30s, right, as opposed to early 30s. Even with, Canelo versus Triple G 1, I felt that might have just been on the other side of that window for Triple G. There's almost like the post Daniel Jacobs Triple G and the pre or before Daniel Jacobs Triple G. Another conversation for another day. Bottom line, Terence Crawford is reportedly, and this is the ESPN report, now the outlets are going official with this one because Terence Crawford and AVANESYAN have both signed to the fight. And it looks like it's going to take place in Omaha, Nebraska, Terence Crawford's hometown. I don't love David AVANESYAN's chances. I think that this is the most unfortunate part. I kind of don't think that Terence Crawford versus Errol Spence is ever going to happen. I feel like there's too much randomness in boxing. There are too many things that could go wrong on either side of this equation. And at least Spence Crawford, I presume, is not going to happen when they are both still in their physical and records wise, like their fight record prime. I think that they could come back and do the fight that should have happened 5 years ago type of thing, so they could both have a late career payday, something like that. But I mean, Errol Spence survived a life-threatening and certainly life-altering car accident and has since had retina surgery. Look, we can't take anything for granted. We really can't. And, including this fight versus David AVANESYAN, Terence Crawford could break his hand in this fight. He could sustain an injury in this fight. He's now almost 35 years old. And again, by the time, if he ever fights Spence, he gets in the ring with Spence, he's going to be at least 35 years old. So, and what's going to happen? Does Errol Spence now want a tune-up of his own? I mean, because if that's the case, that just pushes the timeline even further. I have a similar concern with Tyson Fury versus Usyk. If Usyk, wants to take a fight early 2023 because Fury just had this fight or is reportedly about to have this fight in December against Derek Chisora, how much further do you push the timeline? Because it's like, okay, I want to fight. No, now I want to fight. Now, you get what I'm saying? So we'll see how the timelines play out, what Errol Spence does. Like, who are his immediate mandatories? I believe either Virgil Ortiz Jr. or Boots Ennis, or both in different, sanctioning bodies. I think one or both of them are included in Spence's mandatories. So will a sanctioning body enforce that now that Crawford AVANESYAN is reportedly official? And then can you assume that Spence can still beat Boots and or, Virgil Ortiz Jr.? There are a lot of things that could go wrong. I'm not super excited about Crawford versus AVANESYAN. I would have liked to have seen Virgil Ortiz versus AVANESYAN. I would have liked to have seen Conor Benn versus AVANESYAN. AVANESYAN's a good fighter. I don't see him as being a great fighter, even though he's on a nice 6-fight winning streak with all those 6 fights ending in knockout. His last loss was in 2018 against Mean Machine Kavaliauskas, and that was via 6-round knockout in a 10-rounder. And I remember David AVANESYAN getting beaten up badly by Lamont Peterson in 2017. He didn't get stopped, but man, Peterson was just coming forward and just beating the hell out of AVANESYAN. And then it was the fight before that David AVANESYAN made his name in the States by beating Hall of Famer Sugar Shane Mosley in 2016. Very, very late Shane Mosley. I think that was Shane Mosley's final career fight, and that one went the distance. So AVANESYAN, since that most recent loss to Kavaliauskas, has had kind of a career resurgence with those 6 consecutive knockouts, but I don't think he's got much for Crawford, to be honest. We're going to get into that matchup as we near the fight date. I'm just disappointed that this is the announcement just hours after that Dan Rayfield report on Spence versus Crawford. Now we've got Crawford versus Avanesyan. Please let me know your thoughts on the madness. Damn, I'm just thinking, like, I did a reaction video, and I was thinking about not doing it, but I did a reaction video to that Mike Coppinger story on Spence versus Crawford being agreed to. In retrospect, I'm just going to look back at the thumbnail. I have like a super excited expression, and it all feels very silly at this point. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on Crawford Avanesyan. Damn, we can't catch a break with that one. Yeah, that's why I haven't done any preview footage or speculative footage. And I mean, we'll talk about it in live chats and stuff, you know, Gervonta Davis versus Ryan Garcia, but no standalone video that's like, hey, this fight's like likely gonna happen. I mean, we could speculate, analyze the matchup, but I mean, damn, I really wanted Spence versus Crawford, and I feel worse about this fight happening than I have in a long, long time. And again, Crawford's about to be 35 years old, so even if you get Crawford in there, is he still gonna be the same exact caliber Crawford that we've seen over the years? Let me know what you think. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.